The SoCon is a gathering of influential conservative policy leaders from all across America, and everyone brings with them different experiences and perspectives. Well, my next guest is someone who probably never imagined he would find himself where God has led him today. He thought he'd go into business with his parents or into the dairy industry. Then he went into the ministry. He was a pastor. And then COVID came, and COVID, well, it shut a lot of doors. It opened some other doors for him. He's now the lieutenant governor of Indiana, and that was after serving his 15 years as a worship leader and campus pastor. And so how did he get to where he's at today? Well, he's here to tell us his story. Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith. Micah, thanks for joining us.
Tony, thank you for having me. Thank you for all you're doing. Appreciate it.
Well, it's great to see you. I guess our paths crossed a decade or so ago when you were working here in the state with the now equivalent, the Family Policy Alliance representative here, working with pastors.
I was. So working with Indiana Family Institute. I was the director of the Hoosier Leadership Series. And I was really feeling a burden to get the church off of the bench into the game when it comes to biblical citizenship, stewardship of America. And I was talking to a lot of pastors, and they would say, well, separation of church and state. Oh, well, we don't get political. And I just remember thinking, well, didn't Jesus say in the Great Commission to go into all the world and preach the gospel? And last time I checked, politics is part of all the world. So I could never understand this disconnect. And so I started researching it, and I realized America's foundations is rooted in the scriptures. And if the church doesn't stand up, who will?
Right.
Yeah, so that's what kind of led me.
Well, and that lack of standing up led to an erosion of religious freedom, which really became so front and center during the COVID crisis.
Yes, that's right.
Because we saw, abortion clinics, bars were open, but churches were closed.
Romans 1 says, he gives them over to their own foolishness, right? And, like Isaiah talks about what was once considered, woe to those who say good is evil and evil is good, right? And I think 2020 really was the codification of that in our culture. And we looked around and said, oh my goodness, what is happening? And I think the reason is because the church has been largely silent on these issues for the last 50, 60 years, and we haven't been pushed out. We exited on our own.
Right.
And so when 2020 hit, as a pastor, I said, listen, my job is to defend liberty, whether it's in the spiritual or in the natural. I'm a shepherd. And so when evil comes, I should stand in the way of evil and the sheep. And so I started writing religious exemptions for people, started pushing back on tyrannical lockdowns. And when even our state in Indiana, which is a good state, we were doing things that were unconstitutional. I said, listen, government, you can't do this. God hasn't given you that authority. And I just started speaking out, and my name, ID, and influence started growing. And I would have never thought in a million years I'd be here today, but God moves and opens doors, and here
so
we
you
are.
began moving around the state, challenging the laws that were closing down the churches and silencing the voice of the church at a time when it was needed more than ever. As you recall, at the same time as George Floyd and the violence in the streets all across America, and I think a large part of that was because the churches were closed.
Yeah. 100%. And if the church doesn't do their job, we will lose liberty. Liberty is God's idea. It's not man's idea. And, our founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence mentioned God 4 times. The creator who has endowed us with these inalienable rights. Well, they use creator with a capital C. They're speaking of God. In Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created. That word Elohim means creator. They're making the parallel. They're saying the God of the Bible is the God who gives us our liberty, this Elohim, this creator. And if our politicians don't get this, then we will lose liberty.
And if the church doesn't speak up about it, the politicians aren't going to get it.
They're not going to know it.
So let's talk, Lieutenant Governor, about the process here in Indiana. If I'm not mistaken, there's a nominating convention that takes place.
Yeah. So the Republican Party every 4 years will have a nominating convention that will nominate the lieutenant governor. But for the history of Indiana, we've never had a competition. We're always told as delegates who to vote for the lieutenant governor's race.
And the gubernatorial candidate kind of picks who that running mate will be?
Exactly. And so it's more of a rubber stamp. The delegates come in, rubber stamp whoever the gubernatorial primary winner
Didn't happen this time.
Didn't happen this time. So Governor Braun, while him and I have a great relationship.
And he's a good guy.
He is a good guy.
He was frequently on this program when he was in the Senate.
He's doing a great job as governor. People always ask, because it was sort of an arranged marriage, how's it going? And I can tell you right now, it's going really well. He's a fantastic governor. I'm honored honored to serve alongside of him. But over the last few years, I realized, okay, we've got to have an independent voice in that lieutenant governor's office so that what we saw during COVID never happens again. And so I started getting churches involved. Hey, do you know what a delegate is? Do you know the process? Hosea 4:6 says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." I said, we don't have the luxury of being ignorant. We need to know. And so we started getting churches involved, and a lot of Christians came out and said, okay, I'll run for delegate and I'll be a state convention. We'll support you, Micah, down at the convention. And there were two churches primarily that really took a big interest in this, and they taught people what the delegate process was. They encouraged their congregants to run. And between those two churches in Indiana, they got 63 delegates elected to go to the convention. Well, wouldn't you know it, when the vote total came back, I won with exactly 63 votes.
Wow.
So it was two churches in Indiana that made the world of difference.
I mean, just think about that across this country. And every system is a little bit different, but the reality is if churches engage, they can make a difference.
It was literally just two churches. Imagine, we have 300, David Barton and George Barna did a study. We have 300,000 churches in America. 300,000 churches. And out of those 300,000 churches, only 38% of them have a biblical worldview. And out of the 38%, less than 3% actually engage in what we call politics. And I don't think anything's political. I think it's all biblical.
Right.
And so
especially today, with these issues that are moral, biblical issues have been turned into political issues,
right.
And the church is told to back off.
Yeah. If the church does their job, America will go on and be the city on the hill, will be a beacon of liberty for the whole world for many more years to come. If the church doesn't do their job, we will lose this very quickly.
Lieutenant Governor, we just have about a minute left. As you are now in office, what do you see as your biggest challenge? You also preside over the Senate, so what is the biggest challenge you see that this state and by extension the country's facing?
Yeah, it's strategy, right? People ask me, how can we pray for you, Lieutenant Governor? And it's so hard to know what to pray for because you don't even know the challenges you're going to be up against tomorrow. So what I've said, we've got to be like Solomon. The church, Christians have to be like Solomon. Solomon didn't know the problems he was going to be facing tomorrow, but he knew what to ask.
Right.
He asked for wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah.
And if you go, so if you go to, I think the Chronicles passage says he asked for wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah.
And the knowledge piece is the strategy piece. And that's what we need. We need wisdom from heaven and God's strategy.
In the Hebrew there, it even means the heart.
Yeah.
A heart to lead, a heart to understand the people and what they were facing.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Governor Beckwith, thank you so much for joining us today. What an amazing story. Thank you for your faithfulness and the inspiration I know you're going to be to pastors all across this country.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it.